Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Wizard and the Priestess. Matt has had a slight, what would you say today? Anyway.
I can explain it.
Yeah, go.
Watching this video, you can see someone's hijacked the mic rudely, and we adapt.
So, it's quite an how interesting is this? So anyway, I have toddled down to meet Matt this weekend and I forgot my microphone. But interestingly enough, we're going to talk about something that feels really funny that we're sharing a microphone in union. Anyway, I wanted your joke for today, Matt.
Joke. I can't remember. What was the last one I told? Have I told the nan one?
I don't know. The nan one.
No, because 10 years ago, my nan started walking 10 Ks a day. And now we don't know where she is.
What do you mean? Where'd she go? I still don't understand. Did she die? And then they said that she was walking?
That makes no sense.
I don't understand. Please repeat the joke.
What do you want to talk about today, Nuala?
I hope some of you got it because I didn't. Maybe I will get it in time. Good. I'm glad for that. All right. So we're going to talk about, I've been, listeners may have been aware that I've started doing a biology course with a man named Dr. Sasha Tiesik, and he, anyway, because I'm doing that course, I've then also started following certain people on Instagram. So there's certain people named Brendan Hotsworth, another lady named Anna Lee, another lady named Martine, and they all talk about the biological norm of, or the biological foundation of humans. Now, recently, if you're into podcasts and you listen to sort of spiritual podcasts, you may have heard of the conversation that's come out with Aubrey Marcus and his wife, and how I haven't listened to it. I've only heard it from these people, so second, third hand information. But essentially, he came out and said something along the lines of, I'm opening up my marriage to form a greater union with my wife through having sex with, or I don't know if they're having sex, but essentially I've got the idea that that is the case, but they're going to open up their marriage. And he was told this by someone, like during a spiritual experience, and there was like a particular download from a goddess who came to him and suggested this. Anyway, I'm not here to bag or tell him what is right or wrong. But what I thought was interesting, and what I think is interesting, is to talk about the idea of monogamy. And I think that that is essentially what I see is coming out of this conversation. Now, there's lots of people that I follow now that have been talking about masculine and feminine, and the importance of the union, and the importance from a biological perspective. But what I want to ask to you, Matt, and what we've been kind of discussing about, talking about, is I guess it's sort of coming to this idea of like, how as humans are we, we understand that in a sense in our society, like most people are having, will have sex out of marriage, will have sex because they're promiscuous, will have sex because it helps them feel good. But personally, I feel that we are, as humans, whilst we might like to have sex with different people, to feel certain things, to experience certain things, and that might not be the greatest thing on a whole, because as women we want We want more. Like from a woman's perspective, sex is not just sex. But for a man, sex is just sex. Maybe not. Anyway, let's just leave it at that for the moment. But I would say that humans, as humans generally, from my understanding, are looking to find a partner, and that, like a pair. They're not looking to find a threesome. We're looking to find a pair to create a life with. However, there might be some missing links. Anyway, I'm going to throw it to you, Matt. Where do you believe monogamy originated? Do you believe it's biology, or do you believe it could be something else?
Just hand me the mic. So if we're talking biology, biology is the act of the cell. Yeah? Is that where you're coming from?
You could say that it's the act of the cell, but my perspective more is the biological function of the whole organism. So not just that. I'm not on the microscope. I'm looking at maybe the microscope from the lizard people or the aliens that control us.
Fair comment. Okay.
Actually, sorry, can I say it could be the cell, right? Like when you look at it, that when you stretch out, we are just a cell. What? How I'd grab it for you? Oh, it's all part and parcel. But I just wanted to just touch on that. Is like, it is kind of a cell. We are a cell, like when we are just the little ants. So we're just stardust particles. So maybe it is just the single cell. But I like to think that we're a single cell functioning within a whole. So it's that what makes that function best is is biology to me.
Going to check if I'm allowed to talk now. Okay, we had that on camera. Rude. I can't remember the question. Biology. So, it's not the cell itself per se, it's the collection of cells that make up the organism. So, each human would be a cell in the organism that is humanity. Yes. That's a good thumbs up. So, I mean, from a biological perspective, what makes sense to me, I can't argue with the pairing thing. At the same time, I'll throw a curveball to that in a way and say the biological drive, even priority, is to continue the species, to continue to evolve. The greatest chance of doing that is spreading the seed, so to speak. So that increases the chances of survival. Like at the most primal, basic level. I can't tell you the date where monogamy started. From the research I've done, it happened, I think, up until about either 400 to 600 years ago. Is it polyamory? Is that the relation? Yeah. That was considered normal. And then the Catholic Church made it immoral because of the spread of STDs. So then it became a sin. But it's interesting how it's a sin, but it's not illegal. Anyway. So from a cell viewpoint...
I need to say, we're going to do this all day. Polyamory isn't illegal, but polygamy is. You cannot...
Which one's the married one?
Polygamy.
Right.
So that, like, you cannot... Not everywhere, no. But I think in Australia, you cannot legally marry more than one person. You have to marry...
I don't know why anyone would want to. Personally, that's just my take. Okay, so you can't marry two people. No. But if you are in a marriage and someone has an affair, that's not illegal. That's my point.
Yeah, but that's so different. And I think that's the point.
If someone would let me speak, I could explain. Finish my point before being so rudely judged. So that's just the cell's drive, or the organism's drive, is to procreate in most cases. Now, I know a lot of people are in a monogamous relationship, and unconsciously that's driven by a religious belief. Because it's a sin, right? It's one of the commandments. Look at me like that. So
Can I just know? I don't agree. I don't agree that.
please have a word.
I don't agree that the reason I'm in a monogamous. No, I don't believe that the reason I am moving towards a monogamy is because it is a sin not to be. Like, I don't naturally want to be in a relationship with more than one man. Personally, that doesn't feel like a drive for me. And what I think is interesting, what you just shared about the idea of biology being that we want to spread the seed and you want to make as many babies as possible because you want the species to survive or your particular line to survive, right? Look into my eyes, Matt, because Matt's feeling like I'm doing crazy eyes. But I just want to share a point that biology, whilst you want to spread the seed and continue society, like continue your offspring, in order for a child to be a fully functioning member of society, there is a point where also biologically that child needs their father. And therefore, if we have polygamy as like the norm, in our society, there's going to be a few difficulties in that because the father will not be.
I agree with everything you're saying. Not for a second do I disagree on anything that you just said. The point I was making, it was just, that's the drive behind that. That was it. I wasn't getting to the fact that a child needs both parents. Full stop. I would even argue the child needs more than both parents. It needs the tribe around it. There's an old saying, it takes a whole village to raise a child. What was that thing you were telling me about the brothers and sisters?
Oh, yeah. So I was having this conversation with Dr. Sasha the other day because I wanted his take on it, and he's like a very, very well versed in this sort of, in biological reasoning, biological reasoning in the terms of, coming together. And he was sharing that the potential where, like, I asked him whether he would agree with it. And he said, well, he thought that essentially polyamory or polygamy is good until children, and for everyone involved, until children are involved, because there's going to be a point where there's going to be a need for property inheritance, or like, the passing on of, now we all have our houses or our homes. Where does that pass to? So even from an agricultural perspective. So I think we've talked about, hang on, I won't go there just yet. But what I was going to say, and then I'll give back to you, is that he shares about there's where polyamory might work well is in a space where you've got a little bit of land. Everyone can't have their own land, so you've got only a small amount of land, and where there might be brothers that then have women have. So it's like a collective tribe from like a very polyamorous tribe, but it wouldn't necessarily be that one man is connected to one woman. But the thing is that you also have the thing where if you have a baby if a woman always needs to be protected by a man. And so that's, from my perspective, some form of a biological my understanding is that's biological. So if you then had, say, 6 brothers, and then you brought in 10 women, and then that could potentially work, so that the brother big weekend anyway, they could then, the brothers would never necessarily know whose child is theirs by blood, because they are all by blood in a sense, because they are brothers themselves. So then they will never reject the children. They will all care for them, even if they were the uncle or the father, they're going to care for them. That's where Dr. Sasha was saying that that's potentially where it could work. But we don't live like that. I don't think that there's brothers out there that would be like, oh yeah, I'm fine if I don't know whether that's my child or not, because I'll treat them like blood anyway.
Do you think that's how the show Jerry Springer came about?
Absolutely. It must have been that exact situation where there was all these polyamorous. But I think this is something I want to point out, is that polyamory isn't just in the way that it has to play out today in modern society, it's not just a fluff around. You can't just say, oh yeah, it's okay to be married to one woman but having an affair is fine. No, if you want to be married to two women, but then having an affair through marriage is fine. It's not that, because that's not where polyamory stands. There is like very clear understanding of where we, like, in a polyamorous relationship, anyone that's ever danced in that field is going to understand that you have very clear boundaries. It's not just oh yeah, I just frivolously have sex over here and then I might have sex over there and then this is my partner and that's my partner. It's not like that. It's like, okay, this is the bounds with which I share love and this feels good for me and it feels good for both of us. Yeah.
I'm nodding. Yeah. It's I think a lot of young men will see polyamory as they can just sleep around, and for them that's it, the license. But when it goes the other way, when when it's her turn, let's say, to play the field, the guy doesn't like that. But polyamory works, it has to go both ways in that sense. But it's not just that, it's like if you're living with someone, inviting someone else to live in the house. That's what the true reality is. I've never delved into that, and no, not my thing.
Can I ask you then, Matt, why would it not be your thing? Because if biologically you're meant to want to spread your seed everywhere, what is it? Is it just that you've been conditioned by the church?
Who knows? Maybe. Could be a societal thing, but just what resonates to me as an individual, I would rather pour myself, poor choice of words, I'll take that. I'll say that a different way. I would rather. No, that's worse.
Just keep going.
I'd rather give. I would dedicate. Let's go with that. Dedicate myself to one person and have that back. I'm going to give you the mic.
Yeah, so as you're busy pouring yourself into one woman, we're such children. Yeah, but I believe that there's something innate to that. I don't believe that that's just... I would say that in humans, we all really truly choose that because monogamy feels right, because there's the masculine and the feminine, and that's not to say that you can't have that in any other relationship. If you have, if you're bi or if you're gay or anything like that, you're going to find the masculine in that partner and the feminine in that partner. I truly believe that we are pairing. Humans are pairing peoples. And whilst where did monogamy originate? Whilst you shared that might be from the church, I would feel like it might come more from like I feel like at least in what I'm learning now from a biological perspective and what I can understand about myself and how I probably action a lot more masculine traits than I do feminine. Not that you would understand that, but never noticed that before, right? But now I'm learning about that from a different perspective, and it feels really interesting to actually get to understand the more feminine sides of myself and boost them and understand why it was why that was hidden in the first place.
quick question. If you had to blanket statement answer from the course that you're doing, which is something to do with biology, would you say there are negative connotations to polygamy, polyamory?
Yeah, so I'm sure that you could probably, if you wanted to really dive into this from a really well-versed person, you would go into, follow biorelations on Instagram, or Brendan Hosworth is also another person who speaks a lot to this. But there is, from that perspective, because of the fact that union between masculine and feminine is essential in order to grow a baby, in order to have the protection that is created from that relationship from the father, and the providership from the father, and then the nurturance from the mother, without any other noise around it. So when we think of that, it is really important that you have the solid mother and you have a solid father figure that are playing those roles in the relationship.
So that's a yes.
You loved that. That was like heaven for you, wasn't it? You're like, yeah, like I just proved the man-woman thing again. Yes,
again. And again. And again.
I didn't know it was a yes-no question.
I did say, but anyway. Sorry, finish your thought.
What I was going to say was, before, with polyamory, is the idea that young boys might really like it. And they might like the idea of being able to have sex with more than one woman, but then also be able to have a territory where they can wrap themselves around and pour themselves into one woman a little bit more, maybe, but then also have the place where they can have this other woman as well. But what ends up, or what can sort of seem to happen, is that the women in this like little experience are the ones being used, and they become like a sex doll, essentially, because all the man wants is to have sex. That's like innate in men. It's like men play for points. So the points can be, okay, you get to 10 points and I'll give you sex. It's like, so that is like oh yeah, okay, so how do I get my 10 points today? Instead of actually saying that, you see it play out in experiencing. But whereas for a woman, it's not about sex. It's so much more than that. It's so much, there's so many layers to what a woman needs and wants. And actually, recently I've learned that a woman would not stay with a man unless she can benefit from him. So this is probably where I'd say that polyamory starts to become a little bit more so. I wouldn't say polyamory feels like a bit of a play, feels like something to dance with and play around with, and like I don't have enough experience with it to know. I can see how in our day and age that could be very difficult, because there's such thing as like jealousy and competition that comes up, that has been kind of infiltrated into our society, especially amongst women. And so it would be very difficult. I think maybe if it was a woman with like 6 men, it could be a slightly different experience, but I don't know that would work out very well. At the end of the day, when usually in relationship, why monogamy I think is something that feels really important and powerful, is that children, when a child comes to be, or thought of to come into the world, we know that we need the energies of 2 people coming together to really nourish and produce and then rear this child in a way that they feel held and supported and cared for. But yeah, I want to come back to, who would you say benefits from a monogamous relationship or a polyamorous relationship? Because
who benefits in a monogamous, I didn't say that right, did I? Monogamous relationship. Well, ideally both. I mean, 50-50. That's how it should look. 50-50. Polyamory. Did I say that right? Yep. It's more fluid. So who, again, it should really be the same answer. Everyone brings their own thing. And let's say it's between 3 people. Each would have something that the other doesn't. So as a whole unit, it's like it's a complete whole being type thing.
I hear that. I find it really, it's an interesting thing, right? Because I don't, you're saying.
Quick question. Who benefits out of your relationship more?
Obviously me. I think this is the thing. I think what I've learned is that a woman will not stay in a relationship unless she benefits. A man will stay, even if he's not benefiting in the same way. So, for example, a woman would not be in a relationship with a man unless she can see that he can provide and protect her. Unless there's some really biological issue where, like, she isn't. I truly don't believe that a woman would be in a relationship. And I'm understanding myself, which is like hard to see from this perspective, but that we are not, as women, we are not, we're not in a relationship for love. We're in a relationship for how it benefits us. And if the benefit goes, we go too. So for a man, he knows that he is replaceable and he will not stand a chance if he cannot provide and protect for his woman. So what tends to happen is that, or what can happen is that when a man stops providing because now in today's age, like, we're equals. I can make as much money as you can make. So it's much harder for a man to find a woman because she has much more criteria that he needs to tick off. Now, that's not to say, so what I'm trying to think of is how would it serve if that man, say there's a man and 2 women in a polygamous relationship, and that's not necessarily, they're like married, they're committed to this relationship. You've got two women connected to a man. But those women could be, like, what they must be getting from this man must be godlike to be able to provide everything that woman needs. Women need both sides. So it's quite an interesting, from that perspective of what I'm learning, in that a man and a woman need so many, like, a woman needs so much more, whereas it's so hard today for her to find a man that actually is greater than her own capacity or can, like, provide her more than she can provide herself, which is when children come in, she all of a sudden can't, even while society tries to get the woman back into work as quick as possible, which means that maybe that's where a polyamorous or polygamous relationship could work, when there's the maiden woman can look after the children of the. But I don't think a woman's going to want to share. I would not be like, I would just pay for a nanny if I wanted to go back to work, right? I don't want to bring her into my bed with my partner. Be like, oh yes, let's share husbandry, you know? Or husband, because husbandry is chickens. Anyway. I want to, when we understand, where do you, because when we spoke about this originally, you said, have you read the book Sex at Dawn by Christopher Hawkins, I think? But what do you want to add to the monogamy polyamory?
Well, because when you brought it up, it sounded to me, how I heard it originally from you was very almost one-sided, dare I say. Not going off today's conversation or tone at all. And so I just wanted to give you a glimpse at the other side of the coin. And I don't think there's all good, all bad. I think it certainly will work for some. It'll certainly not work for others, type thing. So I read that book, whatever year that was, and I'm not sure what prompted me to read it. I think someone recommended it. It was just for me to see the other side of the coin. And it was just an interesting perspective, and seeing the history of like recorded monogamy and all that kind of stuff, and the way the organism and the cells want to replicate each other, and then evolve and prolong the species, as it were. So that was coming more from a primate / primal tribal viewpoint. But then it got me thinking, how much of our relationship stuff do we call good or bad is based on societal norms? Because the amount of couples that I would see professionally, so we're clear, and you know, she's going to complain about something, he's going to complain about something, and it's always the inevitable, oh, but he should, she should. And it's like, well, where does that come from? Like, who said that is normal or whatever? Like, does it suit your dynamics? You as an individual and you as an individual, does it suit that energetically, financially, however it plays out? And when they really kind of get to the core of it, it's, well, yeah, she does work, goes against the grain, and they get labelled and sometimes cast out for that. But then again, it comes back to that label that other people put on it.
Expand on what you're saying with regards to that particular example.
Well, in a particular example of, let's say there's I currently work with a guy who has 2 wives. Well, maybe not 2 wives, maybe a wife and a girlfriend then, if it's illegal, or however it works, I don't know. There are 3. I can't remember what it's called. Thruple? Is that what it's called? Yeah, okay. So he's got a wife and girlfriend, and they all live together. And it's all a thing. I've seen them all together, not in that way, just in human form. And they all get along really well. And it's like, when I was talking to one of the girls, she was very left brain. The other one was very right brain. So I could see from his perspective, together they're like a complete, they satiate both sides for him. In a non-sexual, I don't ask those questions, but everyone had a perception for him that they all had threesomes every time. He said it's not that at all. They're just different, and it feels very natural to them. That's all. I don't know much about the Aubrey Marcus thing, but I'm assuming that's probably where he's coming from as well.
Yeah, okay, so the thing is, have either of those women got kids? No.
One.
To him?
Yep.
Okay, so they obviously, were they all 3 of them came together at the same time, or did he have her first and then the next wife or partner? So that all 3 of them came together and then one of them had a baby. Yeah, okay. So it is really cool to see that working, and it'd be interesting whether it'd be rare that it works that well. But the thing is that when a woman is working very much from her left side brain, would that could potentially indicate that she has she's functioning out of her kind of deepest, like, is that the one that has the baby, or is that the one without the baby?
No.
Yeah. Which would make sense, because she probably doesn't have that innate urge for a child. It'd be interesting, and I imagine how beautifully that would work when you've got a child and then you've got this maiden who doesn't want children, but there's a child there and she can just step in and have those extra hands.
Well, they both wanted children, but one just fell pregnant. And they realised that, I think now child's like 18 months old now, I think. And they're realising how much work a child is. So they're like, yeah, I think we're done. That's just a current update. Join us next time for the next update.
What are their names? It's very interesting. Children are difficult, but especially, I would say, especially when there's so many moving pieces in that. There's already moving pieces in men and women, right? I've watched, clients over the years, like, have so much difficulty when they're, when they're wanting to have this baby, and then they finally get the baby, and then they're like, why did no one mention how hard it is? And it's like, but there's so much goodness to the hard. And actually, the reason I truly believe parenting is so hard for a lot of us is because of the stuff we haven't uncovered in ourselves. And once we've worked through that, which takes, 3 kids to actually get to the bottom of it, then you can kind of go, oh, okay, sweet. I sort of understand myself more clearly. I can support myself. I can stretch to that capacity in the way that I need to, and I'm able. And then I can kind of, and they say this all the time, the most important thing for a child is the loving relationship of a mother and father. And why would that be so important? Is that just cultural? It doesn't seem to be, from my perspective. We don't have enough examples of like this polyamorous triangle working in community. It might be becoming cool, but why is it becoming cool? Because I guess it comes back to that, who benefits? So who benefits? Like, if you play it out from a man's perspective, his only focus is sex. He benefits because he's got 2 women available potentially. Then you've got, then you've got the woman, and her innate need is to feel protected, like a sense of belonging, a feeling of protection, a space to feel heard and seen, and to be able to then do the, like, maybe more the maternal aspects of like the nurturing and the caring and the coordinating. And if you've got another woman there, well, there's a lot of dancing but interplay between the 2 of you that would be like dusting off those pieces. Or like, maybe that could work together really well. But I think, there's something very interesting in how that would work. And I mean, it all works. Everything can work. It's just whether or not it really, like, if it's really benefiting both women, or even more than one. There's some men that have more numerous wives, which I've seen play out that essentially is because, well, she doesn't make babies anymore and he needs to keep spreading his seed, so he gets another wife in, and that's culturally acceptable. So it's interesting that you suggest that monogamy, from the church's perspective, polyamory is the sin, whereas from like another religion and perspective, it's like, and then we can look at that and be like, oh my God, she went barren, so you went and found another? That can feel like really hard to imagine. Like, you literally just pretty much showed her that she is not important anymore because her use here is done. And like, I don't know about humans, but I don't know about humans. I sort of know a little bit about humans, but I imagine that for any human being would cause some sort of dysfunction in the body.
Well, that goes back to the culture thing. If that's what you grew up in, that's all you know, is it a bad thing?
Which then comes to that biology perspective where, like, obviously we've walked through this path with Hampus recently, and he was like a refugee essentially living in Australia because he wasn't he never found his belonging here, which is quite a common refugee situation. And then most refugees end up getting quite sick with certain things. So we have this situation where Hampus felt quite sick because he never found his belonging. It isn't that he didn't have any friends, but he didn't have the feeling of true belonging, which is a necessity for a man or a woman or anyone to have that deep. And that's not to say that there weren't pieces of his life that, in like, the life he has walked up until this point primed him for that experience, to feel left out, potentially to feel a lack of belonging. But So therefore, he ended up having the experience he had. So I would say that what you were just saying, whether or not there's anything wrong with it, well, I would say that potentially there's going to be someone that gets a sickness or an illness based upon the fact, because that is what I'm learning in terms of this biological understanding, is that when we don't move ourselves from a biological perspective, we actually have the potential to prime ourselves for when a shock occurs to actually get really sick from it, like to be more sick from it. So personally, I tend to sit in my masculine because I didn't have the protection and providership that I needed from my father. And therefore I became strong enough to do that for myself. And then that actually has like impacted me in a way that maybe it was so that it could have been the fact that that could be the reason why my ovaries didn't function perfectly when I first got my period. I didn't get my period until a little bit later than other children, which is another nuanced quick topic. But it's, and then my periods didn't solidify and didn't become regular, which would be an innate situation of biological understanding. Like, it's like, well, you're not you're not, the hormones aren't equalized here because you're functioning too much in your masculine, which is producing more testosterone than is needed, which keeps my masculine, which keeps me safe. But actually it's in the letting go and understanding. Does that make, yeah?
So that would come from perception. Yes?
Not sure. What do you mean?
What doesn't come from perception?
Well, I think that's the point, is that biology doesn't come from perception. What I just shared doesn't.
What shapes perception? Sorry, I'll ask that better. How do I ask that better? Where does perception come from? What makes up perception?
The brain.
Very good try. Well done.
You're going to be a great dad.
Everyone gets a ribbon.
No. That's not a good dad thing. You got everyone. So there's a winner and a loser. If you have a son.
Perception.
Come on, go.
Back to topic. Perception. What makes up perception?
I don't know.
It's a combination of your internal environment and your external environment. So where does your biology end and something else begins? Just there. Okay. There's a wall.
Just past my auric field, 60 centimeters outside of it. There we go.
Right. Okay. But then does your auric field, your biology, mix with the external biology?
Mixing.
This is going to plan.
No. Just say what you want to say.
Well, we would get sick ultimately through our perception.
Yes.
Our perception
Yes.
is made up of our internal environment, which is the cells that make up our body. Our physical body. Our physical body continues about 10 centimeters out off the skin. The emotional body goes for another 30 centimeters. The mental body goes for another 60. So the point I was trying to make, before you made it weird, was our biology is continuously mixing with the external environment. The combination of all that shapes our perception. If we don't know what... If we don't know what to make of something, if we can't make sense of something, we have to rely on a default setting within the psyche. That's going to be something from the first 7 years of our life. I feel like you want to say something. Go on.
I know, you're spot on. You know Pictionary? When they're right? Do you know Pictionary?
Yeah.
You can go like that. When someone's right, you hold your nose and like spot on.
Thank you for that. So,
Keep going.
I don't even know where I was going with that.
So I think you were going to say that if you grew up in, say, a society where having 5 wives was normal, and when the woman was, no longer making babies, she was passed off, that would be a normal situation. And she may not actually get sick from that. However, even if biologically it would be actually go against her normalcy to accept that, because she needs to be provided and protected by her man, and she needs to be able to feel soft and able to surrender in that. She probably wouldn't have, say, when her husband died, if it was a shocking experience and she wasn't expecting it, she probably wouldn't get, say, breast cancer or something along those lines, because of the fact that, well, she didn't have that that perceptive dilemma. It wasn't a dilemma for her. It was like, oh, we accept that. But this is quite interesting, and we maybe need to touch on this another time. But in a sense of how, that dance between what is that? What's that dance that you always talk about? Whether you're born with it or it's environmental or genetic, but it's not called that. It's something. But it's like that idea. Maybe we can bring it to what's biologically normal and perception, and how much they interplay with each other. Because biology would be more of the genetic aspect, but it's the way that I see the biology that I'm talking about is it's biologically in relating.
That's relational.
Relational. So it's like, what is biological relational? Not from because a lot of the people that I've been following in terms of this monogamy, polyamory, polygamy debate or conversation or response they're quite religious, and they stand in that religious, the connection relationship between man and woman and God and Christ, or whatever, however they connect. And so it's hard to then, you want to peel back that layer as well to understand that is a construct on top, potentially, right? Because when you speak to people that are quite religious, they don't believe that it's a construct on top. It just is, because God and the relationship with God is.
Well, in Christianity, the relationship with God it's a monogod, so there's one God. And if you worship another God, you go to hell. So that plays into the monogamy. I can't even say the word today. Monogamy concept. You can only worship one. And isn't it funny that there's no real correlation. I guess there's a correlation into agriculture and monocropping. But I'm really failing to see the solid link there. Because you could also argue that we're all we're social creatures. The worst thing you can do to a prisoner is solitary confinement. Now, you could argue that polyamory takes that a little bit too far the other way. I think, for me, what resonates when you were saying that we are designed to be in pairs, whether that pair is how's a 3-pair work? What's that called?
It's not, there's no pairs, 3.
What would you call that? Yeah. I think that's just normal for some people. It feels good to them. And I think it is becoming sort of trendy again. I think there's a huge misconception about it. Did you find what it's called?
Threesome.
Is that what it's called?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I think what I want to get down to is more that it's not just like, oh yeah, whatever works is fine. What I want to say, I wanted to get to the point, I wanted to pull out of your brain, was whether that is like whether it is how we're innately meant to be as a paired, even in a matriarchal society. Are we saying that in a matriarchal society you would still have a like, because I think that's what Sex at Dawn talks about, is that our closest animal relative is a bonobo, and they function really well in a what is it called? They function really well in a polyamorous. Well, it's not. Yeah, it is polyamorous. So the idea is that it helps with group cohesion. It helps to reduce. It reduces conflicts. It reduces tension. It does all these beautiful things, and then they just, like, everyone has sex with whoever. But then when they have their babies, they do pair off when they have children. But whilst the baby is being, the father will then tend to the mother, and, that'll happen. But then it's sort of like, but how does that actually happen? Because they don't know who the father is. There's no, like, so it might not be, but that might be where there might be discord. I don't know what more about the bonobos, but the idea in that Sex at Dawn book was just that it could be an option. It's like sort of this thing. It's interesting when I was looking it up, because Matt suggested it to me. Then initially I found this book called Sex at Dusk, which was essentially a direct oppositional book that was like, no, actually, let's break it down, all the scientific facts that they're using to, like, promote having sex with, like, having polyamorous relationships based upon bonobo, was actually a bit cherry picked and a bit like, well, this works and that works. But anyway, that aside, it's more about what I want to try and find is whether polyamory, like whether we could as a society move from where we are now at a very monogamous space, or is it just too far-fetched for our brains to actually open up that far to get from where we are to where, like, how that society would look, where everyone, because personally it doesn't feel like it works. It doesn't feel like it, poly doesn't feel like it's like, that feels like a playful thing before children. It doesn't feel like when I really sit in with myself what I would really need. I personally don't need other women to be in bed with my partner. I would love to have lots of couples in a community space. No, not in terms of, like, not in a sexual thing, but more in a community space where we can rear our children as community and village form. Absolutely, that feels important, but it's not the other way. Like, not from a sexual perspective of opening up and being in a relationship whilst I have my children, because it's it's an interesting one.
I think most people associate polyamory with sex, as I said before, and that's kind of where it stops. They don't think beyond that. Now, let's say, well, if there's multiple relationships within the relationship, every person you're with is going to bring out a shadow of you and you in them. So times that by X amount. Yeah, and if they start ganging up on you. So that's the shadow of it. There's a light and a shadow. So it really depends on you, who you are as a person, your values, their values, etc. Was there anything else on that sheet?
So would you say that there's a part of where obviously it's personal choice, but do you think that it is personal choice, or do you think that, like, humans are made for pairs just like dolphins, or like, I think there's an idea in the Sex at Dawn book where they talk about it's hierarchical, is very chimpanzee like, whereas bonobos are more matriarchal, which I think the push is that would be, surely women would like that more, because the matriarchal system is not about fighting and who's dominant. Like, that's what the man is there to rule and to show dominance, and who is the dominant alpha male, and that is very masculine. And therefore, surely if we go the opposite way, where we're looking at matriarch, and then the woman is sort of like the leader, and then therefore there's lots of communication, lots of over communication, potentially lots of words. But it's like, in that sense, would it be better or worse? But my perspective is that it would actually, like, right now, to transition there, would it not necessarily be so? Then we would have to have potentially a yin yang and a yang,
Or in a matriarchal society, the women were worshipped, and up until a couple of hundred years ago, God was considered a woman, because a woman gives birth. And if God created the universe or gave birth to creation, God had to be a female. More recent times, God's now a guy. God's bi. Anyway.
He wouldn't be bi. God would be, what's that when you have both sex organs?
Yeah.
Amphigamous is what it's not.
Amphigamous? No, I don't think God has a gender, but that's a discussion for another day. I think current culture, we take things too far with a concept. And if we're patriarchal?
Hierarchical.
Yep.
Oh, hang on, patriarchal is the man.
Yeah. Then we switch to the matriarch. We're going to go to the extreme, to like man hating. So, I mean, I saw, what's her name? The really famous one. Taylor Swift. She was on stage. I saw her clip saying, fuck the patriarchy. Basically saying, fuck men, is what I was hearing her say. Whether that's a message, I don't know. But then I thought, who built the stage you were on? Who's likely to have built that stage?
I think, as a very man-loving woman, I find that, yes, me. I find that what I found was, when I started, okay, we're going to stretch this conversation about monogamy into where that patriarchy and matriarchal thing, I don't truly believe that if we were to move from like patriarchal society towards a more matriarchal society, I know what you're saying in terms of like we would, like, there's this flip or this idea that then we have to become man hating. And I think it's taken me quite a few years to actually truly understand that. And that has come from realizing that anything that isn't from love is hate. Not anything that isn't from love is hate, but anything that isn't from love actually doesn't serve. And so I think that I followed quite a lot of feminist pages for a while, because I thought that felt right. It made sense because they were sharing pieces of the puzzle that made sense to me. I definitely grew up in a place like in Cronulla, where I would go out to Northies on a weekend, and I would obviously, be, dancing around trying to find my mate potentially. And it was like, but then I would be taken advantage of. There would be men that thought it was okay to just grope me. There'd be men that thought it was okay to just grab or touch what they wanted. Not okay, absolutely not. But when I shared this to my partner, like years later, and we were sitting in a group of friends, I knew this was in Sweden, so it was a slightly different group of men. They were so appalled and shocked that I'd ever sat through that or experienced that. They had no idea that was like, they were like, what? A man what? that you've had to sit through that. And even I've sat with like my gay uncle and his partner, and we've literally talked about this too, and they were in shock that that was ever a thing. So this was around the time of the Me Too movement that really really pushed men into a bad light. And so it was that time when feminism became there was quite a big, loud, yelling voice in that arena. And I'm sure it's still there. I've just turned off to it because it didn't sit with me well anymore, because I didn't take into consideration that men might be experiencing something similar, in that like they've been sort of pushed into this corner too, where they're also not feeling heard and seen and appreciated for all the things that they do provide and all the protections they do give. And so it was very interesting to really see that there was pieces that felt right. You know, a man shouldn't take what's not his. And there shouldn't be, there feels like there should be a line from what a woman is suggesting. Like, she's not asking you to touch her body and you're touching her body anyway, hopeful that it's acceptable. Like, there's like this, it's a kind of interesting dance there. Whereas a woman would say, hey, no, this is my body. If I'm dancing, let me dance. If you come up to me and I look at you and show you that I don't want you to touch me, you shouldn't try and touch me. But then there's a man's perspective of all I want is sex. So it's very difficult for me to stop myself.
There's also a man's perspective of certain hormones coming online at a certain age, probably not being educated from his parents or his tribe on what to do with that. And then he sees someone who, if I'm to recollect the Northies days, these were not recent, but like, you might as well just wear a tea towel for your entire outfit for the night. Like, some of the things, bloody hell. So I'm not condoning it, but I kind of get where the guy's coming from, because it's that primal, I want that, I'll take it, unless he finds out the hard way that it's not, that he can't have it, type thing, yeah. So I think that's where a lot of young guys are coming from, and it just comes back from, like we've said numerous times, a lack of wise elders in our tribe.
Yeah. So do you think then that because we've got this lack of, and this is also a thing I think with regards to monogamy, obviously there's not that many people going around, oh, I want to be in a relationship with 3 people. That sounds great. Like, let me seek out my 2 people that I can, or 4 people or 5 or whatever it is. It's not that common to see that happening. It's not necessarily an innate feeling. Most women are looking for their mate in one way. And I'd say the men, potentially the same, because essentially if he's looking to spread his seed, it might be, you know, more than one woman is a difficult feat, like you were just sharing before about the poking the bear in the shadows and things. But it is quite interesting to me that we are missing the elders, but maybe because the people that are for us haven't really showed us or given us very clear indicators of how a monogamous relationship can work and does work, and how you can work through the hard times. Or, you know, when you go a bit further, and this is where like that feminism thing really like was like shouted or louder, was that, you know, the grandmothers of today ended up sticking it out with these terrible men, but it really did become a man-hating thing, instead of it being like, okay, but like you said, if we had this conversation a few years ago, I wouldn't have been in this position to be like, yeah, actually, I can see how powerful and supportive a man can be. And I would want to, you know, now I can see that and be like, how I want to draw out that positivity in what a man is capable of. And like, the providership and the leadership and all of those things that the man can do in a really great way. Whereas a woman is much better, like, analytically. She can think more, she can see things more clearly, because she can see all the pieces and then be able to, like, give you the analysis of all those things. Whereas, the single focus of the man is much more difficult. He can outsmart her in every other way, but her intelligence is going to be much smarter than a man's because of the way we're wired in a function of society. Maybe there's ways that men are smarter in the way that they function, or do things particular ways, I'm sure. I'm not trying to denote that.
I think it depends on what you classify as intelligence. What type of intelligence. So, also, I don't think I've ever met a man or a woman who has a desire for multiple husbands or wives.
No.
I've never met a guy say, I really want several wives. I've never heard that. So, maybe it's like I think maybe innately we want one, which is the biology you're talking about. And then later, as maybe things,
We don't have that formation.
if that foundation isn't set and things start to get not boring but a bit monotonous, that's when something else is alluring to the other. And I'm just going to hold the mic because I can see you're about to burst, so I'm going to talk for as long as I can. And I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but that's when a lot of polyamorous thoughts would arrive. And then the desire to act on that, let's say you do act on it, right? And I think it's fair to say most people would not have the blessing of the other person to chase that. So then you're just riddled with guilt the whole time.
What you're talking about isn't polyamory just now, though, right? No. Polyamory has, like,
unofficial polyamory.
Well, that's cheating, which is not, which goes against the relationship, and that's not polyamory. I think that's really important to note, that polyamory has like a rules and guidelines, and you work within your own system that you've created within that foundational relationship. And that could be between 3 people or 4 people or whatever, but there's a foundational relationship happening. And so what you just shared is cheating. Not that's going outside of the union of the relationship. That is, like, deceitful, right? But what I was thinking when you were speaking of it is that maybe the reason we have more of these things, like in kind of a summary of whether or not monogamy or polyamory, however way it works, like you said, I've never met anyone either, ever, that's like, I'm looking for 2, like that feels good for me. I don't believe that that's necessarily the church have told me that that's the way it should be. However, obviously we know that in other cultures they are actually accepting of that. And I don't know, like, the women that I have met. So I met a woman and she was in her early 40s, and her husband was very sick and dying. He was 80. And I was like, hang on, what? You have an 80-year-old husband? And she's like, yeah, because he is. But the minute, like, it never felt right for her to be, and she had 2 children to him who were like 20 years old, because she had them when she was like 20 and he was 60. But either way, it was quite an interesting, that was mind-boggling, but I was very open-minded to hearing all about it. But we connected in a place of Sweden, which was, kind of equal, like, very particular about certain things. Everything's open and you can do, everyone's equal and whatever. But it's quite interesting where it's like, when we don't have the wise elders, we don't have the rites of passage for, to contain the hormones, to not contain them, but channel them into the way that they're meant to be utilized, to understand that as a man, it's important to be invited, not just take what you want, because as the power in the masculine is able to hold and contain. And then also, in order to connect with the feminine's going to dance around in a tea towel, and he has to then contain that energy.
He has to know what it is.
And has to know what's going on inside of himself as well. But then when we look to the elders, what are the elders? We've either got the elders that are yelling, screaming, like my grandmother, who is like, men are the devil. Essentially, everything that's bad can be denoted down to one man. And then she also at the same moment like praises all men, like particular men, like can be very for certain men and very against other men, but then kind of all comes into this men are not so good. Then, and then every person there'd be, I would say, a handful of relationships that I can see outside of, within the tribe of my friends and their parents that actually are fully functioning man and woman monogamous relationships. So it's very difficult to actually see monogamy function. So then it's very easy to then infiltrate with polyamory or with like feminism or with like, not that I actually really like feminism, is just giving women an idea. I really liked the idea of feminism, but it's the shouty feminism that is really, it's then putting men are bad and women are better. And that's not what feminism actually stood for. It was like women shouldn't be denoted to just being a sex play toy. And they should be more than that, and they should be seen and preserved in that way. So I think that's what I was trying to get to when we don't have those wise elders that actually display monogamy in a really beautiful way, because one, the woman might not be feeling like the woman, like she's not being revered as the woman by her man, by her husband, and we're not seeing those relationships play out very well. It then it's like wildfire for anything to be seeded and grown. And that's I think that's like, do you want to make that sound better?
Yeah, you're going really well.
Yeah, I think so. Good. Yeah, but it just kind of feels like that maybe encompasses why we're getting the dance of this happening more.
Where do we learn our relationships from?
Mum and dad.
Parents. So it's really, I guess it's kind of related to the Bonobo's monkey see, monkey do.
That's not a monkey. That's monkeys, not bonobos. Monkeys are in the hierarchical. So maybe you've actually dropped the bomb on that, but because monkeys are, I think, monogamous, whereas bonobos are like the fluid. Anyway, that was a good ending. Hope you enjoyed our conversation. If you're wanting to dance monogamously and create a baby, you might like to learn from my course that's available on our website, www.thewizardandthepriestess.com. And the link is in our show notes. Hope you have a great week, guys.
Bye.
Keen to hear your questions or thoughts around monogamy and whether you've ever danced with polyamory. Hey?